Number one, I hated roller coasters and I never rode them. I don't like them.
Hey everyone, Sean and Michael here, and we're really happy to invite our guest Bob Gurr on today to talk to us. Bob is most famous for being one of the original Imagineers responsible for creating attractions such as Autopia, the monorail, the Abraham Lincoln animatronic, and the Matterhorn, which is kind of how we got connected to Bob because Bob saw our version of the Matterhorn and was kind enough to reach out to us. And so, Bob, thank you so much, and we're happy to talk to you today.
My pleasure to be spanned all the way across the country from my cozy spot, and I don't even have to drive anywhere.
Are you? It's Los Angeles that you live in, Burbank? Is that where you're at?
I'm technically in the city of Los Angeles, but the city of Los Angeles has districts, and the one up in the mountains is called Tahunga. I live between a 3,000-foot mountain and a 5,000-foot mountain in a nice little valley. It's very quiet. I'm on top of a hill, 50-mile view, wild animals, dead-end street, and a hot tub, and super sunsets.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know we would love to talk to you about your experience with Imagineering and something that I think we talked about before, but I think you've got a really unique perspective. Something that's not really mainstream now is kind of being more of a free thinker when it comes to Imagineering and ride design. And I know, like, for us, when we were building, our two rides, we didn't go to school or anything for this. It was really just learning it on the fly. And I mean, we look at like other backyard roller coaster creators and we're like, oh yeah, that's what they're doing. But you basically did that on a commercial level and were the grandfather of all of them. I mean, when you think about the Matterhorn being the first, tubular steel coaster, and you didn't have a background in that, but you invented it. And I don't know, maybe you could talk about like being a free thinker and how that allowed you to do that.
It's kind of hard to describe something, say, over 65 years ago. Life was quite a bit different. Industry was quite a bit different. We had virtually no, in at least the Disney company, we have virtually no meetings. Everybody was a self-starter. They didn't wait for instructions. They just took off and do what they thought needed to be done. And it was up to Walt to catch you if you weren't going in the direction that he thought you ought to go. So it's an entirely different thing compared to the complex industry today. All different kinds of industries that you basically have companies are led by MBAs, which means they're trained as a generalist and they know absolutely nothing about what their company does. So it's a very awkward thing compared to, say, an entrepreneur like a Walt Disney, who wasn't trained as an MBA, but he sure as heck knew what he wanted to do in life. The fact that he would then collect people that could do some of the things that he wanted done, because you got to remember, there's a key thing about entrepreneurs. I ran across this with, when I had the Gurr Design Company, I did jobs for Steven Spielberg. I did jobs for Steve Wynn in Las Vegas. Remember, you have a guy that has a lot of power, has a lot of money, has a lot of ideas, gets somebody to write out a script and make a couple of drawings. Now, what are you going to do? When you decide to proceed, you've got to find people that will take your original thought, which wound up in a script, which wound up with some watercolor paintings, and say, we're going to dig holes in the ground and cut metal. Now you have a problem. You have to find these people. And in Walt's day, people weren't in, let's say, overtrained categories. There were people that they were thinkers, and they're kind of independent. And then generally speaking, Uh, in those days, we were pretty fearless. We just come out of World War II. Everything was optimistic. Everything's up and up and up. 55 was a very peak year in American history. So you had people that were eager to do stuff even though they didn't know how to do it. Compared to today, where a company will say, we have to see your resume with all the boxes checked because the boxes are checked, then that means you're perfect. Well, maybe not. If you aren't a good thinker, if you aren't eager and willing to volunteer and jump up and do stuff, well, maybe this is not going to work. So if you get my drift, that
Yeah.
era of American industry 65 years ago was quite a bit different today. So it's a little bit awkward to use the filter that you have today, looking backwards, to ask a question: how did people do things? So that's a long-winded kind of a generalization.
Yeah.
Let's say when we come to my particular case, Walt hired me in October of 1954 as part of people he was looking for outside the studio. He had 11 people in the studio that were writers, movie producers, artists, etc., and assigned them to his own personal company called WED Enterprises, which was inside the facilities of the Walt Disney Productions studio in Burbank. At the same time, they were looking for some outside people to come in and do some of the other stuff. And I was part of that 7 people from outside. For a movie studio to build an amusement park and need a car designer, that's a pretty rare thing. Where are you going to find somebody like that? Anyway, I found out a little bit later how I got picked and got asked to come out to the studio. I got a phone call, it gave me about 20 minutes to get out there. I had a hint that there was going to be something to do at this amusement park. And I also knew about, there was a little car on the back lot that had no body that was going to be part of this amusement park. So by the time I got to the studio gate and talked to the guy that was the lead on all the design at Disneyland, yep, they got a little car chassis with no body, and they're looking for a body designer. And oh yes, I was trained at the Art Center School to design body styling, nothing to do with engineering. And that I worked at the Ford Motor Company for about 5 or 6 months, and then another little company in Detroit, and I came back here and just kind of goofed off and did what I want, and then go to the beach in the afternoons. So the phone call sort of changed everything. I immediately saw that what they needed was a body, so I could do that. And of course, hopping ahead, within about 5 years, I'd done about 55 jobs for Walt, big ones and small ones. And then comes the need for an all-new Tomorrowland, which was going to have a number of attractions, one of which is the Matterhorn. So I got started on the Matterhorn quite early compared to the other jobs I was going to do also at the same time. I was going to do the Matterhorn track, design a monorail system, design a submarine, design a motorboat for a motorboat cruise, and do the new Mark V Autopia car all at once from spring of 58 all the way to June of 59.
Wow. It's just crazy.
Now I'm 90 years old and I can I survived all that. So more to the point was specifically you asked about the Matterhorn. Number one, I hated roller coasters and I never rode them. I don't like them. Walt said, well, Bobby, I want you to get started on our monorail. We've got Aero Development up north. They're going to build the track. And then my head modeler here, Fred Jurger, he built this beautiful model about 3 feet tall. And he says, I want you to put a roller coaster in that mountain. Oh, by the way, Bobby, put 2 tracks in there. I've never had any engineering training. I failed in the 10th grade on Geometry 1, but Mr. Gordy gave me a pass. Why? I don't want to see you again. Well, my math was cut off at Geometry 1. As soon as I got into this business of a roller coaster track, I needed trigonometry. And I had a little booklet that showed trigonometry. Oh, it's a circle, it's a triangle, it's all in Latin words, you know, sines and cosines and hypotenuses and all that stuff. But it had a little chart of the relative numbers relative to angles. Oh, there was no calculators in those days. You had a slide rule. What in the world are you going to do with a slide rule? Well, if you got a chart and it's in a little tiny book, you're home free. Why do you have a whole semester to be taught trig when you can do it in 15 minutes? Sorry to rub it in, fellas, but to do with a roller coaster, you know, it's a gravity ride. There's this thing called a neutral slope. A neutral slope definition is that whether kinds of wheels or weight or size or whatever, neutral slope in the roller coaster industry is defined as a vehicle placed stationary will not move. Also, a vehicle moving at some intermediate speed will continue to move and neither speed up nor slow down. That's called neutral slope. It also means if you don't know what you're doing and you have a dip, you know, you go up the peak and you come down, you come back up again, don't dare come up above the neutral slope. Aha. Well, there's the assignment right there. Next one is, okay, you have to, I had a long piece of paper on a long board, so I put the neutral slope on the bottom of the board, and then up in the middle of the board with pencil and compass, I twirled track around many different designs over the days to, number one, get all of the track winding around in plan view and going up and down all the dippy doodles, leaving room for the structure that would hold up the building. And there was constant conflict. Because the key thing about any roller coaster is that's going to have humans in it, you have what's called swept volume limit. In other words, you have to assume a 95 percentile person, a male, will put his arm out and try to hit anything. Now you have this semicircle around the track reference point, reference course line. That means the vehicle and the passengers, you got a much bigger slug of space that's all churning around, not hitting one another and leaving room for the building. You follow the problem?
Yep.
In hindsight, to do that with a pencil and paper and a compass, and do it on flat paper, and do it within a matter of 2 months.
That's just crazy.
Your brother's not even smiling. All right, you follow, you're with me here? All right, once you face these things, you can now rearrange the track every afternoon when it doesn't work by moving the columns on the building, which have not been established by the structural engineers. They're waiting for me to tell them where the columns go to hold up the building. Okay, you start with a 20 foot by 20 foot, then an 18 foot by 18 foot, then you go to an 18 by 22, you come back to 24 by 16, round and round and round. I did this for at least a week. moving the columns every night, and then starting all over the next morning. And finally, I got to a track where about 3/4 of the track had gone outside the area where there was going to be vertical columns. That meant I could tell them, okay, well, there's the columns, and then I'll keep going for the rest of the track that goes outside. So it becomes a closed loop going into the water trough, goes back to the dispatch point, ready to go up into up the chain lift. But the critical thing was the timing of the columns. I found out shortly after that Disneyland had been building wood forms for the concrete footings and the grade beams, pretty extensive forms. And they were redesigning the forms every night based upon my latest dimensions.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
It's only a bunch of, 2x12 planks and a bunch of sticks, it's just the day I called him up and I said, I got the column grid for you. Here's the numbers. So I gave it to him, and next morning, the guy phoned up and he says, don't change it. Why? The transit mix trucks are on their way and they're lined up to pour. Oh. Now think of this. Today we would do it by computer.
Yeah.
Today we would not release the track profile until the structural engineers had already designed everything, and it's gone out to bid, and then the bid process, and then you have to come back and make the agreement, on and on and on and on and on. This would take forever. So there's a quick look at how Walt Disney did stuff and how, without any experience in the amusement park business, he built Disneyland.
Right.
Everything we did on all the projects, at least the ones that I worked on, were done exactly that way. There was no engineering knowledge required. If he asked you to do it, you better go figure out how to do it. So I had a terrific education. I had engineering over a long period of time, and I never paid a dime. I got paid for it.
Yeah.
It was quite a few years before somebody said, well, what about your stress analysis? My what? Oh, we're dealing with materials that'll break. Oh. They break after a while. Oh, really? I went and bought a book, Corrosion, Fatigue, and Naval Aircraft. And I started looking at these gory charts, gory photos of broken forgings, all this stuff. And then I saw really quick two things. Selection of the materials. Don't get engineering fancy by choosing high strength steels. You want to poke your nose into the welded chromoly world? Well, help yourself. I don't want to get that far. Start with low carbon steels, 1018s. Work your way to maybe like a 1040. 1040 is pretty good. It's cheap material. Guess what? You can bend it like mad and it won't crack. Oh, and you can weld it reliably. Oh, say, this is pretty good. You have to be quite conservative in your thinking. And this came up empirically because now I'm finding out, I'm in the world of fatigue fracture. And I only did welded aluminum once, never again. It's very tricky in the welding, but if it's stationary, it's okay, not a problem. So these are the kind of educations that you get by actually doing the job that you were asked to do that you were not qualified to do. But the clue was, if there's a guy like a Walt Disney and he has these people, what you call Imagineers, and they all have the same kind of fearless thinking. They will go along with, you want to do a what? And you are going to make me do that? Oh, well, that's, and he walked away. He did this probably almost every job that I got involved in, because he'd come over, talk to my boss, Roger Broggie Sr., who ran the machine shop, and they say, Bobby, we're getting ready to do this thing. We've been thinking about it for a while, and we're ready to go on it. We're going to do a monorail, and here's the pictures of the German one, the company talking to this company. It's not very attractive, so we're not going to buy their car. I want you to get started on our monorail right away. And he walked out of the room. There it is, right there on the wall behind me. He did that to everybody for everything. What that meant was you couldn't have a continuing conversation relative to the fact that you've never done one of these and you're not qualified. That didn't count. You were asked to do it. Generally speaking, what I've figured out over time is, if you have people that are interested and fearless within conservative limits, what they don't know, they will go immediately find out what they don't know and start filling in all the little blanks. Sometimes when I lecture at colleges, I try to describe the situation if I were to hold up a square of cardboard that's got some little bit of black and white squares all over it, but not too many. Treat that as you're going to eventually fill it with black and white squares. You're going to fill the entire space from basically white with a little bit of black. This means if when you're given the job to do something, you already know a little bit about something. If you've been a curious kid starting at least at 5 years old, that means you have a primer start. The idea is you want to fill in all the gaps in that piece of cardboard until it's 100% filled, black and white squares. That means you already know where you're going to go specifically for each little detail. And in those days, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have computer. We had slide rules and stuff. We had public libraries, encyclopedias, that kind of stuff. So you use your smarts in whatever era that you grew up in, to find out the stuff you don't know. Once you get into that rhythm, you become an automatic self-starter the rest of your life, because you have no fear trying to ferret out information you need for the instant case that somebody puts you into doing. In my case, I never did anything over, so I never got good at anything, which meant everything I did was a new thing, which meant training would not have done me a bit of good, because everything I do would have to be a fresh search for all the stuff I don't know about the instant thing. Simple thing, like I do a Matterhorn, I do a submarine. Oh, submarines, they want it to sink. Oh, only down about 3 feet. Well, we found a way we didn't have to do that, so I don't have to figure that one out. I get up a job in Las Vegas with a sinking ship. Well, this is 134,000 pounds of something. It's going to sink and come right back up 3 times a day. Yeah, okay. So you go learn about more stuff. Everything was like that. Doing a job for Michael Jackson with lighting. What do I know about lighting? The guy, I was like in my 50s, he's 26. He wants some kind of animated lighting stuff that you can't get. Because if you know rock and roll stuff, you write your lighting spec, whatever community your touring place stops at, you go out and get your lighting spec, and then you get a low bid and rent the stuff and put your show up. Michael's difference. He wanted a big spectacular thing that you can't rent because it doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And he was trying to find somebody who would say yes. You know, it sounded reasonable to me. So I got the job. But guess what? 10 minutes after I get the job, rock and roll. I haven't gone to a concert. When? Jim Morrison, I think, with the Doors was the last one. What do I know? Oh boy, I had to learn really quick in about 2 days. What am I in for here?
Right.
Caught on real quick, and the job actually went quite straightforward, quite easy. It took about 9 weeks, start to finish, $250,000 job, a never before ever been seen thing. Had a lot of tricky stuff, but we took it down and loaded it up on the stage, did all our rehearsals in a matter of a couple of days. You know, lighting guys, sound guys, magic guys for giant show. That was the Victory Tour, 1984 Victory Tour. You go back and look that thing up.
Yeah, we will.
I met the most interesting people. A lot of the guys from England, all younger guys.
Yeah.
And they looked like, they kept asking me, says, who are you? Where did you come from?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm twice as old. I'm not in their industry. They've never heard of me. And I'm out there in the middle of the night serving out electrical cables into Socaplex terminals and all that stuff, just like everybody else. And then our stuff runs full test the day before theirs all went. And they're in the business and I'm not. So when you're in a situation like that and you want to ask a question, oh, they will take time to explain their trade to you. Guess what? Now I'm learning all this new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a rhythm that has been consistent all these years.
One of the things that I think is really fascinating about you is when you look at some of your early designs, like for Autopia or the monorail, we're looking at the image behind you right now. I mean, it's quite beautiful. It's quite stunning. It's a style that is timeless. And it's really interesting how you combine the gift of being an artist with the gift of being the mechanical engineer. Were you always that way? Did you always have like a mind for the artsy side and the mechanical? Or did it just kind of happen because, like you said, you just learned on the job. You just had to do it and you kept moving forward?
No, that's the perfect question, because going back a few minutes, I pointed out that I was not, a lot of people are not specialists. We were more like generalists. Yeah. My background goes back to 4 or 5 years old. I was enamored with cars and airplanes. Of course, I had Crayolas and I was drawing on my closet wall with Crayolas, and my mother caught me at that. So after that, I got lots of paper, free paper, and more Crayolas. Okay, so I had a sense of everything I saw was fascinating in the sky and on the street, because we live next to an airport. But I was so interested in the things that don't exist. You know, I read the funny papers. Mm-hmm. I like Buck Rogers, you know, all that stuff. It was more fun to create something with my Crayolas that doesn't exist, which meant over time, without not understanding this at the time, and I understand looking back, I saw things as more fascinating if they didn't exist. And then I could see that, oh, we just do this by simple think about it and make sketches, make little drawings and stuff. I think looking back in my high school days, because I was a car nut, we had auto shop, metal shop, wood shop in those days. Schools don't have any of that anymore. I was very familiar with hands-on materials, what materials do and what they don't do. Being a car guy, I'm always looking for some used parts to fix up my old Model A Ford. So I had access to junkyards in those days. Junkyards, you could wander around, help yourself, and tell the guy what you want to buy and take it off and pay him and go. I became very aware of how automobiles are built, and particularly how they crumbled when they got wrecked.
Mhm.
So I was quite aware of how materials behave. Just kind of a general background.
Yeah.
At the same time, I really like interesting looking shapes. I went to Art Center School, which is a professional school teaching you about what we call in those days automobile styling, just the outer surface of the body shape, nothing to do with the engineering.
Mhm.
So I did have professional training in what constitutes what I would say proper design. In other words, the techniques for designing beautiful surfaces that reflect the light correctly, proportions, all of that stuff. I had a super teacher who probably taught maybe about 4,000 designers. Most of the good designers around the world all went to the school and taught by this fella named Strother McMahon. Up above the monorail, you can see his picture up there. That was Strother McMahon. So I did have a guy that drilled perfect design of surfaces into your head. When I got to Disney, of course, naturally, an Autopia car body. If you ever looked at my book or anything, you saw one of the original Autopia cars, or kind of a dark maroon one that didn't have any bumpers. I made that one for Walt Disney. And if you look at that car really, really careful, that's a little itty bitty car, like an amusement car. A child can fit in there and look correct, and an adult can still get in it. And the proportions standing alone by itself, it has really nice surface development. In other words, that's what you call it, that's technical surface development. So that meant I automatically had a feel for, let's say, industrial design of any kind, because I'm very aware of what it takes to do appearance surfacing correctly. Then at the studio with the little Autopia car chassis, which the guy had built it, but he didn't know how to build a body. And then when he found out that Walt had hired a guy to do a body, then the guy would not build any of the chassis. Oh, I'm assigned to the machine shop boss, Roger Brogy Sr., and he says, oh, you're going to do the body. Well, you better do the chassis too. Oh, oh, there's the difference between working on your Model A in the machine shop and you are going to engineer a whole car. Oh my God. So you can see you get thrown these things.
Yeah.
But the fact that it made an automatic matchup all the rest of the projects I ever did. So this is a long-winded way to say, how come stuff that I did that was strictly amusement park, why did it look professional? It's because I saw an amusement park stuff is always really junky. And here's a Walt Disney, you know, I only know him from Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. I don't, you know, didn't know much about him really. But if we're going to do something new, the vehicles we do should look like they came out of professional industry. And that rule got started with the first Autopia cars. Then within a year, the idea was we wanted antique cars on Main Street. And Walt sent me off to look at some guys that had old antique cars for sale that they thought of fix them up or rig them up to be durable. And I says, no. I know enough about antique cars. Don't even think that way. Well, what are we going to do? Well, I'll just design one, as simple as that. Design an old car. So I had access to a book about treasure early American automobiles. So now I could see here are the exact details of appearance you should have in a 1903 to a 1905 car. And building a car of that type is so easy. The frame, it's just a ladder frame. They got a 2x3 1/8 inch sticks steel to start with a frame. Ladder frame, real simple. Oh, front axle. Oh, I went to a race car shop and bought a sprint car axle that a guy ordered and it never came back for it. Oh, I can put Model A Ford hubs on it. Oh, I can get a Jeep rear axle, a Spicer with the right gear ratio. Oh, everything else from the radiator to the back end, I can store, buy everything for the running gear. Well, then the frame is easy, and then the body is just sheet metal stuff.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Were you actually the one assembling it? Were you on site with the team doing all the welding and everything?
Oh, okay. Now you're coming to your third question. Okay. Being a hands-off kid, paying attention at school, fussing with your own cars, now in a Disney studio where we're going to build stuff on our own in our own shops. I naturally worked with all the fabricators and the welders. I was in the shop all the time. In other words, since I'm not trained as an engineer, I don't know that you were supposed to wear a tie, make the drawings, give it to the boss, and he administers the job and you stay out of the factory. No. I'm in the shop the whole time. Hopping ahead to the monorail. Yes, I'm going to design the monorail. Oh, the shape. I already got the shape down. Oh, I'm going to figure out how to do the structure. Oh, I did that. What are we going to do electrically? Okay, we figured out how to do that. Okay, we got a company that builds garbage trucks. That's the closest company we could get to build a monorail. It was a garbage truck company in LA. So I'm down there every day with them. And then they get behind the schedule. My boss pulls the job out of this company, Standard Carriage Works was the name of it, and put it in a movie studio sound stage. And my boss looked at me and says, Robert, you supervise the manufacturer, but don't stop designing it. That was a fabulous invitation. I could now go to high-speed sketching, no more finished drawings, high-speed sketches. I got shop guys. They've never built a monorail. They're movie studio laborers. But, you can sketch a part, enough, pencil and paper. A guy can see what you want. Go get this thing, cut it here, bend it here, and drill a hole there. And I walk over to the monorail and I drafting tape it to the side of the train. I says, go find the material and make this and then put it in. And when you're done, come back to the end of the line, I'll give you another one. So you do a hybrid way of high-speed manufacturing, totally unapproved, totally uncertified. We're going at a very high speed. Then we deliver the train 2 weeks before it's opening day, because the date's already set.
Yeah.
When he says, Bobby, get started, the date was already set. We put the train together and it broke down every day. There was always some little part did not behave the way we wanted. So we had a German engineer come over and help me with it because he was in charge of engineering of the all-wake monorail company. It wound up that we were out of time for the dedication day, cut the ribbon, waltz there. This buddy of his, Dick Nixon, who was the vice president of the United States at the time, there's no time to train the ride operators. There's no time to train the manager of the ride operators who are going to drive the train. I'm the test driver. I was doing test driving for 2 weeks. And then even costume department made a uniform for me in the middle of the night. So the next morning I could dress up as a ride operator. And then I drove the rest of the afternoon giving all the media rides in it while attempting to train the manager of the monorail system how to drive it so he could start training the other drivers and I could go home.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, that's like saying on a job, you could be a generalist. You could think about it, sketch it, know what the mechanical stuff was going to be, know what the outside was going to be, know what the interior is going to look like. And from that time onwards, everything I ever designed, I could see exactly how I wanted it to be. So it looked really professional, real cool. No screw heads showing, no fasteners showing. Looked like something General Motors would have done.
Yeah.
This turned out to be real easy. Guess what? On the Mark IV monorail for Walt Disney World, which was a much more complex machine, you know, a lot of honeycomb form panels, a lot of custom extrusions, no fasteners showing in the interior. You already know what your primary structure is, which is the big, heavy load-carrying bones of a machine. You now know what you want the interior to look like. You know, these thermoform Kydex panels. Oh, we can use headlock fasteners, which are, you know, like Velcro. You just snap them in. You know, you just pop them in and they're stuck. Now I know what little fasteners I need, and I know what secondary structure I need to do, which is lightweight that goes to the primary structure. So in other words, if you are not the stylist in a department and you're not the engineer in the department, you avoid the meetings and you avoid the conflict, because you got one designer says, here's the bare bones structure, here's my fancy styling look, I know what goes between. I make the layouts of all the parts. In the case of the monorail for Florida, about 95% of all the parts, I've laid them out myself, right down to the doublers and the hole patterns, rivet patterns, and make these layouts at a furious pace and give them out to my drafters.
Wow.
In a way, you get really cocky and you know you're in charge of everything. And you got to watch out about your hubris going to make a machine that won't work someday, which I never did. That you can be totally in charge, right to every freaking detail, right down to a rivet pattern. That's absurd, but that's what we did, and that's how we worked, which is totally different from industry and training and education today.
Right.
That's an awfully long-winded answer, fellows, but that's
no, it's so thorough, and it actually kind of leads into the next question, where, you know, for us, we look at Walt Disney as kind of this thinker, this person who is like once in a lifetime, once in a generation. I mean, one in a million, and you never really see anyone like that. And I feel like the world needs more people who encourage that type of thinking. And I know for us, we really like right now Elon Musk. We feel like Musk is one of the only ones who's really driving that and pushing the industry to like ask, like, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we go to Mars? Why can't we build electric cars? Why can't we build tunnels underneath the ground? Do you feel like, you know, there is a vacuum or a space for thinkers like the way that you work, the way that Walt works in today's industry? Do you think that there's an avenue for more generalists?
I'll give you the name of 3 guys. Richard Branson, all right, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Steven Spielberg. Okay. I met Musk about almost 10 years ago. Quite a character. Jeff Bezos I admire very, very much. One of my trainee guys that first started mentoring about 10 years ago. I worked for Disney, worked for Universal, did a lot of big projects. He works for Blue Origin.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So, and Jeff Bezos talks to him. Okay. Yeah. You look at those 3 names and you already know what they do. You could look a little bit more. There are people today that started out as modern young people growing up in our modern world, compared to my old world of the early 1930s, Bezos is a fearless thinker. He thinks about what if, and he will follow up a what if with some very logical step-by-step thinking. These are people that they're not what we would call a Disney dreamer. You know, Disney always says, oh, if you can dream it, you can do it. Well, the rocket rods didn't work, so
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll be very cautious. These are the kind of guys that will collect and inspire people that think a little bit like them. They will be able to see the different steps that it takes to get to the end result of the machine that you want to do. They're not dreamers. These are guys that can see stuff and figure out the paths that will actually work. So if you launch 1,000 people and millions of dollars, you're not going to waste it, because it's going to go on a set of steps that will gradually get there eventually. Carefully done. Bezos did this with, we used to go to the bookstore to buy a book. Who would buy a book on an electronic thing? What in the world is that for? The world is Amazon today. I don't shop anywhere. I just sit here at my computer and pick out what I want. Comes right over. It's just like that's one man thinking that way. You got Jeff, that's Jeff Bezos. You got
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg. He's a guy that he was fearless about making movies. I worked for him for about five months. He was the kind of a guy that would never take no for an answer. He'd say, well, if it doesn't work that way, well, we'll just find another way to make it work. 100% flexible, never give an order, say, do it my way. No, together we do it. We find a way. Walt was the same way. Well, if that didn't work, well, we'll find how it is going to work. Stuff like that. Musk is the kind of a guy who, quite an interesting history, by the way. He was Time Person of the Year last year on Time Magazine. Completely wild, free thinker that could see so far ahead and still know the steps it took, the no nonsense steps. He's a guy that when Fremont was having a terrible time trying to get the Mark III, the Model 3 assembly line to work, he got so frustrated, he had a bunch of the parts out in the parking lot in the tent and says, we're going to figure this thing out. He's sleeping on a cot at night in the factory.
Wow.
These are real people. Richard Branson, read about his history. He was an 18-year-old in London selling records. You know, happy-go-lucky, followed in the path of the Beatles. But he saw things that could be done on the basis of, wouldn't it be cool if we could?
Yeah.
And he builds airlines. He would fly balloons around the world. He would work with guys who would fly airplanes around the world. He was a guy that could build something, create a company, create employment like mad, and then sell it off and go do something else.
Right.
He has a company called Virgin Galactic out in the Mojave Desert. I was invited out years ago to spend a day at Virgin Galactic, sitting playing around inside their first spacecraft, you know, the one that a few months later it had the accident. But you know, and how it runs, he was able to take a ride in it. He works with guys like Burt Rutan, who was a brilliant designer, uneducated. Yeah, a guy like Branson sees no end to what you could think up and find the way to do it. And actually it will work.
Right.
One company after another.
Right.
So yes, that's a long-winded answer to where are these people? Oh, they're around us all day long.
That's really words of wisdom and really inspirational. And I think leads into, I mean, the last question that I really had, which I look at at you. You're 90 years old. You've lived the lifetime of 10 people, and you're just so joyful and so energetic and just like living life. And I feel like our generation, a lot of people unfortunately don't see the joy in life and don't see the inspiration. And you know, I think for us, we want to like bring joy to the world. And so someone like you who have wisdom and you have experience, like how do you stay so joyful, and what would you recommend to people that are, you know, from a younger generation? How do you stay this way, keep the spirit?
I love that question. It's what I focus on when I work with young people and mentor people and give college lectures. Yes. Sometimes when I open my mouth, they stop breathing for the first minute. They're hearing stuff they never heard before. um, let's put it this way. The history of civilizations. I study the history of civilizations going all the way back. I'm reading constantly all the time, trying to get a picture of how did we get here? Who were all these people? What were all the evolutionary paths of thinking? What are the characteristics? And there's a lot of characteristics that humans have that are very, very inherent. They're quite complex, but it amounts to the fact that there are humans that some percent are automatically wish to dominate. And that covers a lot of territory. These are natural characteristics that existed 200,000 years ago. They existed in the 3rd and 4th century BCE, and they're identical to what's going on today. So that when I read about different parts of history in great detail, what I see today on the news is exactly normal, because the human characteristics are there. They are the same. The trick, I think, with people is to have people begin to understand the human characteristics, and just sort of step aside for a moment from their immediate chaos in their lives every day. So many young people today, don't get me wrong when I use the word young people, because I don't know how else to explain somebody who's a 20, 30 something without saying 2030s. They become overwhelmed with all the life they see around them. And a lot of them don't have sense enough to back off, just back off a bit. These are the people that I would say never grasped the idea of optimism, and they became a pack of been there, done that's. And I'm serious when I talk about the been there, done that. That is where the natural enthusiasm gets damped down. 15, 16, 17, 18, somewhere right in that period of time. It goes back into a peer group starting roughly around the 7th grade. 7th grade, you now have period classes. You don't have the mother hen in the 6th grade that you had anymore. You learn too much too soon by the time you're 7th, 8th, and 9th. And by the time you're 10th, you think you know everything in the world, so nobody can show you anything new and exciting. Been there, done that. If I say I like it and get excited, they'll call me a dweeb or a nerd or a dork. The advice I try to give to students is you want to beware of this world around you that's like that, which is basically public education today, the class warfare, the peer group pressures. Some people are extremely social conscious. They're extremely aware that they're not doing as good as somebody else, and they learn that through social media. In other words, you have to step back and not compare yourself, appearance, and knowledge with all those you see around you that some of them you don't even know them, but you know them by the hundreds because what do I got on my Instagram? I got 2,200 friends. What you've just done is to expose yourself to people that you cannot affect, that you cannot change them. You shouldn't let them try to change you from your inherent characteristic that you would like to see for yourself. So then the kid will say, well, how do I do that exactly? And I said, well, number one, you got all these scientific interests like mad. And you know, if you speak up, you'll be the dork of the class. You have to go into a kind of a subterfuge type of life. Just chuggle along with your peer group so that you fit in like, oh, we're supposed to fit in. But privately pursue your passions, but say nothing. Don't say anything to anybody about what you're really, really interested in. That way, number one, you calm down the vulnerability being picked on by other people. You know, girls have a terrible time. They mature before guys, and then they're all on Instagram or TikTok. They compare themselves with other people. You've got to not do that. I should speak up. I got, 29,900 people following me on Instagram. Don't they have anything else to do? But I'm serious about this.
Yeah.
If you try to disengage from this uncomfortable, chaotic life around you, there's so much detail in the world, you really should just know it's there, but don't focus on it too tight. Just be aware. Look at the things that inherently are driven from your heart, not your head. Anybody in an instant, if they calm down and think about it, I find out when I go to an event and the parents come up and say, my child wants to be an Imagineer. And there's a kind of a standard rhythm. I'll start talking to the parent, kind of size up what they look like in their eyes. And then suddenly I'll look at the kid and I'll say, or a girl too, and I say, when you were 5 years old, what turned you on the most? And I get only two kinds of answers. What? Look at the mother. What did the old man say? Or I get the kid just goes like, blah, 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 mad. And then the parents say, oh, let me tell them about him at 5. And right away, that inherent enthusiasm is in a ton of people. It's inherent. The fact that you have to have this inherent enthusiastic optimism and curiosity, but don't let your peer group know you are like that. You're in the peer group because, you're in the school that you're stuck in. Once you leave or get thrown out of school, you can pretty much choose your environments. That puts you in a position where you can explore your natural self and find out a lot of people would be like enthusiasm about a lot of stuff, but you won't be able to flourish if you see too much of the negative side or too much of the disapproval side. The disapproval side is quite a killer. Look at the suicide rate in the last 2 years of girls. There's people get to what would be a good spot, but the good spot is so black, they can't see past that part. That's the toughest clue. And it comes down to the word, can you actually disengage enough that you can think a little more clear by yourself, with yourself, to see that it ain't as black as it looks because you've been watching in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
kind of wanted to take it back to the theme parks a little bit, and I
Maybe
wanted to
close
get
it
your take on kind of the more virtual direction that things are going with all the use of screens in rides versus an actual physical layout that you're going through with animatronics and things. Because I personally I prefer the more practical effects. It seems more real versus the screens, which it just seems like you're looking at a screen. So I kind of wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're asking. Let me back up just a little bit. When I was working for Steven Spielberg, we were talking about the movie Jurassic Park. And you make physical devices in Hollywood. This is called a practical. When you have any kind of animated anything, this is called a practical because it's a physical thing. And this has been industry standard. And I'd been hired to help him figure out a Tyrannosaurus Rex for a movie called Jurassic Park. And in the course of figuring out what are we going to do, he wanted me to figure out how to do a Tyrannosaurus Rex for his movie because he watched me build a King Kong several years earlier. And he saw that it's a 30-foot machine and the thing worked very good. At the same time, there were people saying, no, you can do this eventually with computers, but they weren't specific. They just said you could.
Mm-hmm.
So it was two events working for him where I was having lunch with Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy as head producer, and Dennis Murin from ILM walks in the door and says, Steven, we're getting there with our Pixar deal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we've just about got CGI to work. And I remember that lunch stopped and we're all looking at Dennis in the corner of the room. Steven stops cold. And he says, I think we'll hold a Jurassic Park for a year and I'll do another movie. Dennis, keep going. That was the Hollywood turning point that you could accept virtual reality right there. Then a couple of years later, I'm designing Godzilla, a 30-foot tall animated Godzilla, physical, practical thing for Sony TriStar, who didn't have the money to buy something from ILM. Okay, but they were working on it. In the course of the Godzilla movie, the shift was made from all practical machine, and guys running around in man suits and stuff like that too. But the big Godzilla was my machine. The transition was made during the course of that movie that the last of the movie became really, really good. It was all CGI. So I lived at 2 points several years apart. The first inkling that you could do is a CGI, and as of record, I did the last giant practical in Hollywood.
Wow.
So I saw some neat history. Now, to directly answer your question, it's mostly economics. CGI is so easy to do a practical machine. Why would anybody do a practical machine if you could get away with not doing it? Now I know that's opposing your opinion that you asked, because a lot of CGI sometimes is not very good, but some of it is so outrageously good it leaves you walking out and wondering, what in the world did I just see? Because it's like it's monkeyed with your mind enough. If it's done with motion just right, that ride down at Pandora, what's the name of that? The one where you're riding the animal and you're doing all the
Flight of Passage.
That one is right about the perfect balance. It's enough story that you'll buy the story. It almost gets you when the animal you're flying on is out of breath and has to stop on a tree limb, and you can feel it breathing
Yeah.
Yeah.
on the machine.
Yeah.
The fact that the visuals are done so well, they're more beautiful than terrorizing.
Mhm.
Okay. I would use that as one that says, if you keep telling stories and going in directions like that, where you're doing good hints of stuff, and let the guests, their mind will fill in the gaps very, very nicely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a superb direction.
Yeah.
To do something like that. To do it in Rise of the Resistance. You've written those?
Just recently.
Yeah. We just
Yeah,
read it
I have-
last week.
I have the misfortune that it always breaks when I'm on it. I would say, generally speaking, my opinion, just looking at a lot of stuff, the Rise of the Resistance is a mile too far.
Mhm.
Mm.
People always try to one-upmanship. It's a curve going up a wall. It gets so much harder to
Yeah.
spend money and effort and time.
Yeah.
But at some point, there must be a sweet spot that tells you that's about as far as we ought to go. Why don't we flesh things out really good at that point?
Yeah.
Because the Rise of the Resistance, I understand the need for ever more, ever bigger, because Disney has got caught in the fire on their feet created by Harry Potter. 3 Harry Potters in a row making big awards at Disney, nothing. That's a lot of fire under your feet to one-upmanship.
Mhm.
And they developed the ideas. Number one, we're going to have the giant walkers. Okay, we're going to build a big building. Okay. Now we're going to take the floor-mounted vehicles. Oh, we're going to have a complicated story. It's so complicated, only the aficionados understand that story. And in the end result, the attraction, when you see people that go on it, they're not blown away, they're puzzled.
Mhm.
They walk in and they see all of the armed white guys, and they know what they are because it's from an old 1977 movie. But they stand there and it's a big room. What do? The guests walk around and take selfies in front of the White Army. The story just went poof.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing you do, you go in the wall, they cut a hole in the wall, laser cuts the wall, the door comes on. Come on this way, we're going to save you, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
What do? You're standing there with a bunch of live cast members in stupid looking gray Gestapo outfits, trying to tell you what to do and what not to do and where to stand in these 2 different corridors. And the vehicle at the other end is broken.
Mhm.
And there's nowhere to go, and there is no way out. And after about 10 minutes, the cast members, the guys who captured you, they walk away.
Mhm.
The story goes poof again.
Yeah.
Then you finally get to a good part where the vehicle's going along, and there's a lot of shoot 'em up on the right side. Really spectacular, but it goes by so fast and it has no meaning.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Then all of a sudden it ends. Oh, we're saved. Okay, well, what the hell was that all about? Oh, we're in the gift shop. There was too many interruption points.
Mhm.
Too many. It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. But the overall effect,
Yeah.
they completely lost it
Right.
compared to the one I talked about first. So in the future, I would say there's going to be more and more and better virtual reality type of stuff. If it's smartly done, if the story makes sense, because too many young designers today, they can say, oh, this is cool, let's do this. Oh, we can do that. Oh, this is going to be terrific if it works. You need to have a little bit more look at the eventualities of, does that story hold together when there's malfunctions at different kinds? Should you make so much equipment that is such touchy equipment
Yeah.
that the machinery has to behave flawlessly.
Mhm.
It's got to behave as flawlessly as the airplane you just flew down to Disneyland on.
Yeah.
There's the difference.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll say on that subject is, what's the ride that has the most reliability in the Disney parks? The Omnimover. It's dead simple, but it has 10,000 too many parts.
Mm.
Well, one day I was in the maintenance area looking at the ride, and I apologized to the guys. I says, you know, I apologize. There's so many wheels on each cart because it's a mechanical thing.
Mhm.
And they says, but Bob, they all run the same direction all day. And I thought, well, yeah, there's a balance between what you would do in a configuration based upon a story. So there has to be caution in the story first.
Right.
Mhm.
If the story is going to make such logical sense to somebody that a person who's untrained in the story can get it,
Mhm.
you got it. You say the word pirate. Oh, I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
You know, you say the word tiki. Oh, I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
You say the word Pandora. Oh, that was a fabulous movie. Oh, now I know what that looks like.
Right.
On
Right.
and on and on. But Galaxy's Edge is a narrow scope of story only for certain people. It's a very tiny percentage of the guests that go to the Disney parks. Park people to go there and they get in the line and wait for 4 hours because everybody said it's pretty good. You can't, it's a not miss. Don't go and don't do it. And they do it and they come out and they go, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Storytelling. So I would suggest that pay attention to all the CGI that's going on and combining so many different techniques. Walt would just love today. He was always looking at the new tools to tell stories better and better and better. I remember the day we were in Pittsburgh at Westinghouse in January 1966, and they're showing Walt Disney the first laser he's ever seen.
Mhm.
And at lunchtime, that's all we talked about, what we could do story-wise. We just saw, and it was a laboratory setup, big tabletop thing with lasers.
Mhm.
Red lasers with humans walking around with no guards. So yes, he was a storyteller. He loved looking for the latest in tools. He'd be the first guy to say, yeah, this might work, but what if we do it with a good story?
Uh-huh.
No, that's awesome, and I think that's a great place to end it. Bob, thank you
All right.
really so much for agreeing to chat with us, and thank you. Did you have any questions for us, or not that we have the wisdom or the experience that you?
Well, I got two observations. You're probably the first guy that has given me a series of extremely deep and heady questions, which took me right smack off into my favorite areas. And I'm watching the look on your brother. He's not very emotional. I don't know whether I put him to sleep or not. I kept looking at his reaction. I think he's a very deep thinker, very, very deep, but he's not in the esoteric world that you were in. Yeah. So that was very interesting observations, guys.
No, I think you nailed us, which is kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, think about what we just talked about, or you mostly listened to here, because you did ask questions.
You're amazing. Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
All right. You guys too. You
All right.
sign off and go, what in the heck was that all about? Okay, Jim. See you around.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Okay.